Let me give you two scenes. A room full of angry officers in 1783 and a theater packed with generals in 2025. Different centuries, but the same question lingers in the air. Who draws the line between the sword and the law? Back in the final days of the Revolutionary War, the American army had every reason to be furious. Congress had promised them back pay and lifelong pensions, but the war was nearly over and the money never came. Anonymous letters circulated in the camp at Newburgh, New York, calling on officers to pressure Congress, maybe even refuse to disband or decamp west until their demands were met. It was the gravest civil-military crisis of the Revolution, and the man who stopped it was George Washington. He arrived, unannounced, at the officers' meeting, and he stood before them and denounced the anonymous summons as unmilitary and subversive. He warned that such a path could deluge our rising empire in blood. Then, in a moment few forgot, he pulled out a letter from a congressman, then paused. Struggling to read it, he reached for his spectacles. "Gentlemen," he said, "you will permit me to put on my spectacles, for I have grown not only gray, but almost blind in the service of my country." One officer later wrote, "You might see sensibility moisten every eye." The officers backed down. They reaffirmed loyalty to Congress. There were no threats or no mutiny, just a republic, still intact. This story, the one you're listening to right now, is shared in memory of someone who lived with that same spirit. A follower of this channel named Mary dedicated this video with the following message: "In memory of my father, who taught me to love questions more than answers." If you'd like to dedicate a future story to someone you love or something that shaped you, just click the link in my bio or on screen here. I call it lighting the story lantern. Thank you to Mary. Okay, back to the story. So that moment in 1783 left a mark. 4 years later, the Constitution was written, and it drew clear lines between military power and political temptation. Congress declares war, funds the army, and sets the rules. The president commands the forces, but not like a king. As Hamilton put it, this power is in substance much inferior to monarchy. And Madison warned a standing military force with an overgrown executive will not long be safe companions to liberty. Which brings us to now. In 2025, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has summoned hundreds, nearly 800 by some reports, of America's top generals and admirals to a rare short-notice meeting at Quantico. President Trump is expected to address them. The stated theme? A return to warrior ethos. On its face, that might sound like a motivational talk, but the scale, the symbolism, and the timing, they've raised alarms. At the same time, the Pentagon has imposed new restrictions on press access. Reporters must now sign agreements acknowledging tighter limits, including pre-approval for some unclassified information. Watchdogs say transparency is shrinking. Civil-military trust is fraying. And a silent question echoes under it all. What happens if the chain of command becomes a political stage? Newburgh reminds us, mass gatherings of military officers aren't neutral. In 1783, the threat came from below, discontented soldiers aiming upward. And in 2025, the pressure may come from above, a president using proximity and symbolism to shape the culture of command. And that difference matters, because politicizing the military doesn't start with orders. It starts with atmospheres, with meetings that blur civic purpose, with norms that slowly erode under applause. Washington diffused his moment by stepping into the room and telling the truth and pointing the officers back to Congress. He used humility, not power, or procedure, not spectacle. The question now is, if those guardrails are being tested again, who among us will speak with the same clarity? And if the line between professional command and political loyalty starts to blur, what do you expect Congress, or the public, or the press to do about it?